She protects the spaces around and the new structures that she builds. In 2001, Brinda turned her attention to Badali, a little village in Gujarat that was demolished by an earthquake. Was it possible to rebuild the village exactly the way it was before the disaster? Yes, it was. Brinda did just that. So I had the honor and the opportunity to write Miss Somaya's story, and despite all my research, we came up with a couple questions for her. The first one being, I live in the US and I know you studied there, so what made you decide to move back to India and to set up your architectural firm here? And secondly, what made you decide to work publicly and volunteer to build and restore public spaces?
Well, I was just waiting outside, and one of the gentlemen there told me that I'm well dotted. So it's great to be here, and I would like to first congratulate the three women, Lakshmi, Reema, and Sharda, for bringing out a book for children, because this is something we all want to do and need to do desperately. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a different generation from some of the young ladies sitting here. I was in America those days. It was the 70s and 80s. And many people who went there at that time never returned. A lot of my classmates, a lot of young people, we all know that. I remember studying there, and one summer I was at Cornell Summer School, where I now happen to be a professor. And I spent the whole afternoon with a whole lot of Indian professors and their wives having lunch. And they spent the whole hour or two talking about India. And I saw myself maybe 20 years from then doing the same thing. And that's not what I wanted to do. I certainly did not want to be peripheral to any society in which I lived. So I had actually got admission to another master's degree. I went back to my university, and I called my mother and said, I'm coming home. And no regrets, because I think to live and work, in a country as rich in its culture, in its diversity, in its language, in its food, in its art and its culture, and feel that you are part of it. To me, that's the most important thing. And that's why I came home.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to round up the panel, can I have Kavya come up here and pose a question to, who are we posing the question to? Dr. Seema Rao. Dr. Seema Rao, please. Thank you.
Namaste to everyone. I'm Kavya Tapalor, and I'm here to introduce Dr. Seema Rao. Seema Rao, first Indian woman commando trainer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here is a passage from her story in the book. As a child, Seema was bullied. She would cringe with a mixture of helplessness and revolt, hoping for a strength that would put her on par with the bullies. Years later, after she became a medical doctor and married, her husband introduced her to martial arts. She embraced it and began her transformation from weakness to strength. Dr. Seema Rao, I have 2 questions for you.
Yes, what are they?
Number 1, I'm 8 years old and I've seen many kids being bullied.
Okay.
I've also experienced it myself. From your story, I know that you were bullied. Can you tell me and all the other kids out there about it? Question number 2.
Yeah. Okay. First and foremost, let me say that I'm extremely happy to be here with you wonderful people. And otherwise, my life is all about commando training. I'm India's first and only woman commando trainer. Yes, I train men commandos. And thank you. and I go to the nook and corner of the country. I go to ice-clad mountains, scorching hot deserts, and dense jungles, and I train the commandos. So if you look at me, you'll wonder how I reached commando training. Well, it was not my life's design to be there. We all believe in destiny, so that's what destiny had something else in mind for me. So I started off as a doctor, but ended up training commandos of the Indian forces. I'm going to talk about my childhood because I think, certain incidents in our life change the way we think and change what we want to become. One of the incidents was way back in school. What's your age?
8.
8. I must have been about 8 or 9 years old when there was an incident in school that, changed me. There were these, girls in our class, and they were, ones who had failed the class. So they were about 2 years elder to all of us. So one day, what those girls did is they, lit some firecrackers under the desk, and one of the girls' uniform caught fire. And everybody ran helter-skelter, and there was only this girl whose uniform caught fire, and obviously she was hospitalized. And everybody was asked in the class that who was responsible for this. Nobody owned up. Now, the thing is that I am also the daughter of a freedom fighter. I was very close to my father. So I think a certain degree of righteousness is, what I had inside me, which I realized when this incident happened, and, I realized that I was the only one to tell, the staff, the teachers, that it was these girls who were responsible for that incident. Nobody else said anything, but I was the only one. I was afraid, there's no doubt about that, but somewhere I thought it was just unjust, and I thought that, people who are responsible for doing harm to somebody else should be taken to task. So that was what happened then, and of course I paid the price for that because, about a few days later, my exams were around the corner. Those girls were taken to task and they were punished. So they had to get back. So one day when the school left and we were all leaving the classroom, I was the last one to get out. And these girls cornered me in the corridor. They caught hold of my hands. They pulled my bag. They removed my journal and they tore it to pieces in front of my eyes. Now, when you're the studious type and you see your journal being torn and the exam round the corner and you know that it's going to cost you your marks. So I looked at them with disbelief, tears in my eyes, and I couldn't do anything about that. And I still remember that helplessness that I felt at that time. Years later, I would like to tell you about another incident, but this was, when I was about 17 or 18 years old. So I met this young Dr. Male. He was into martial art, and then that's when I realized that if I had to change from weakness to strength, then this was one way I could do that. So I started learning from him. And there was this incident which, again, changed me forever. We used to live in Chowpatty, very close by. So we used to go to the beach and we used to practice martial art. Let me say that we are a very, very bonded couple. In fact, in the forces, people call us the ideal buddy pair. The ideal buddy pair is a concept where two people are that close that I can trust my back and that nobody is going to shoot from there because of him, and the same with him. So coming back to the story, so we were training over there on the beach, and it was about 9 o'clock in the morning. It was a hot, sunny day. And the beach was getting empty. It was time for us to go back. When suddenly there were a group of these, rack pickers who were passing by. And they happened to look down and see what we were doing. And they started passing lewd, demeaning remarks at me. We decided to just ignore them, continue with the training. And once we got off, they were standing at a distance, and we had to pass by from that route. So my husband said that, okay, now that those guys are there, you're going to have to face them. And saying this, he moved out of that place. I think that was very important. I thank him for that, because I think that day I decided, or I learned to fight my own battles. As I walked towards them, I was very scared, so I decided that maybe I'll just walk across and finish with the whole thing. And suddenly one of the guys came and stood in front of me. I was looking down and he was in front of me. I moved to the left, he moved in front of me. I moved to the right, he moved in front of me again. So he was obstructing my path. I was looking down and I was very scared. And slowly I looked up at him. And what I saw in his eyes, I did not like. I saw underestimation. I saw the look as if, you're just a woman. What can you do? You're weak. You can't harm me. And, I don't know what came over me, but I lifted my hand and I slapped him across the face. He got extremely enraged. He came back at me, okay, and he tried to headbutt me, tried to hit his head into my face. Luckily, I just bent down and I lifted my knee high up and he got a hard shot on his head. In the meanwhile, the other guy who was with him, he came towards me, he opened up a knife and slashed it across my body. Thankfully for my reflexes, I just moved out. My t-shirt tore, but not my skin. I was enraged. I grabbed his hand and I just threw him down on the ground. Soon there were other people who came there and the rest is history. But what I want to say here is that bullying is a very common thing that happens to all of us, I think. But I personally didn't want to be on the receiving end of that. I was weak, there's no doubt about that. But I decided that that equation had to change. I couldn't stay weak forever. So I wanted that equation to change. And later on, of course, my life has been full of a lot of hardships, 2 near-fatal injuries during the 20 years of training the forces, and bankruptcy, and not wanting to have my own biological child, a lot of all that stuff. But let me say one thing at the end of the day, if you're happy with what you do and if you face adversity, looking at it, eye to eye, then that is what makes all the difference.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Rao. Thanks, Kavya. So that gives you an indication of how inquisitive kids' minds are. And what I'd love to do next is to stitch that up with a personal favorite story of mine. And I hope this dazzles you as much as it dazzled me, and then we can get into a discussion with you guys as to what you think, how fair or unfair the world has been. I do want to start with a disclaimer that my job in this panel is to bring the law of averages of some power hitting women out here down a bit, because that's what I do.